Welcome back. You're listening to the panel discussion, Modernizing Federal Networks, sponsored by CenturyLink on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today, Alan Hill, the Director of the Office of Telecommunications at the General Services Administration, Howard Spira, the Chief Information Officer at the Export-Import Bank, Ches Sigavananam, the Chief Enterprise Architect at the National Science Foundation, and Zain Ahmed, the Vice President and General Manager for Civilian Sales at CenturyLink. Now, just before break, we talked a little bit about this idea of SD-WAN and how it's playing more into this network modernization. Both Alan mentioned it and Zain mentioned it, is growing use of it and the potential of it. So Zain, let me start with you and just talk a little bit about SD-WAN and what you're starting to see, the requests you're seeing from agencies, and why it's important now more than ever.
So I'll use Department of Interior as a kind of flagpole where people should be looking at, because they truly embrace the need for modernization. They looked at it, said our requirements are going to evolve over time. We're going to look to scale faster, grow faster, be able to provide more services to the rural areas too, where bandwidth is a little challenging. And how do you do that? Is layer on some technology that helps you prioritize traffic. I think SD-WAN is a good building block. The other pieces of the pie that are starting to show up are network functional virtualization as well. Especially given COVID-19, where when we can't even get to our sites and there's a touch aspect of it sometimes that is required, field dispatch is required. NFV and SD-WAN combined together provide you the ability to scale faster, even deploy software from your central hub. So, and you have a controller that controls everything, and you can deploy within a couple of minutes or a couple of hours and scale much better to a rapidly changing environment. And we continue to see technology evolve at a pace that's far greater than our ability to kind of work through the change itself. So having your infrastructure ready, your foundation laid out right, making sure your security aspect of it is intertwined with how you design your network is far more critical than ever before. You know, the days of TIC 2.2 are coming to an end soon. And what we're seeing evolving from that perspective, we had conversations with our customers around TIC 3 autopilots. With COVID-19 evolving, they're asking for, let's go into production now. And what helps that? Having a cloud strategy behind your solutions. We can scale, evolve faster, and respond to our customers a lot faster.
You make a good point about evolving and scale to the customers faster. Alan, that's one thing about the EIS contract. That's one thing that GSA is really trying to promote is it's not just this, hey, turn on a circuit, turn off a circuit, but hey, you got to add more circuits. Hey, it's just, it's quick, it's easy, hopefully, and not too expensive.
Yes, thank you, Jason. Yes, on SD-WAN has been a game changer technology for the enterprise. On EIS specifically, there have been 27 solicitations that have where the agencies have requested SD-WAN. In addition, other agencies have left the latitude for the vendors to offer SD-WAN without specifically calling out requirements for SD-WAN. In September 2019, the Small Business Administration awarded a task order where they're converting their MPLS network to an SD-WAN network. What's important about that is the type of technology that SD-WAN offer is what is leveraged in the cloud, and it provides applications in a more efficient manner to a more broader surface network, to where you're not going through the traditional TIC 2.0 type environment and bottleneck. And on top of that, what Zain talked about, the importance of taking TIC 3.0 and applying that so that you're not going through those bottlenecks and having applications delivered in a secure fashion to the end user in a much agile way, and be able to scale up and scale down based on your needs. And that's an important aspect of being able to do, and COVID-19 kind of brought out the skeletons of how our federal networks are not agile, and we need to move to that agile framework to where network as a service, so that, for example, when you're having a large staff that needs to telework from home, allowing the vendors to go through that process of upscaling to that capability without the contract mechanisms being in place and the national procurement type cycles to go with the logistics and all that. The vendors can be much more responsive in providing those service and move into a more consumption model where network as a service is consumption model. SD-WAN would fall and align with that, along with TIC 3.0 and zero trust, and being able to move to a more consumption model and be able to meet the demands of the business applications for the customers.
The key to that, what you said, a lot of it was the consumption model. And I think that's what we're starting to see now. Howard or Ches, let me bring you guys into the discussion as well. That consumption model, is that starting to be a concern for you guys as COVID-19, as people work from home? How are you dealing with that? Maybe Howard start, and then let's go to Ches.
Sure. Well, I think one of the first things we recognize is the agility of these software-defined networks has been critical in terms of our COVID-19 response. And at the same time, though, as we started to get into this space, not only on the network side, but on the in the cloud side, we know that we're on consumption-based models, and so we had protocols for managing and monitoring our consumption relative to our financial forecast baselines. And we recognized very quickly that we were having a huge shift in the baseline. So our administrative team within the office of the CIO has been working very closely with our networks and infrastructure team to update our baselines. And we think last week this week probably represents probably the best indication of what we think a good reforecast would be based on, and ensuring that in conjunction with our procurement team and our chief financial officer, that we can fund, at least for us, what represents a significant uptick in consumption relative to where we had initially forecast the year to be at.
Does that concern you when you see, because you budgeted for, and I'll make this up, $1 million, and now you're spending $2 million. Is that a big concern? Do you work to how to turn down consumption, how to mitigate some of those risks of consumption?
Sure. I mean, one of the things that we did, and like I said, on these between cloud and the network, the monitoring and telemetry we have is really incredible relative to where we were 5 years ago. So one of the things that we did is, when we saw a lot of the utilization going up, we have the kind of telemetry and analysis to look into that traffic and say, what's it really about? And then actually issue guidance to the bank staff to change certain habits. So for example, we just happened to notice that we had some congressional hearings involving the Export-Import Bank that were happening coincident with the shift to telework. And people on-prem were used to watching it through something we call XMTV. And we were able to isolate on that type of traffic and request that staff that were now teleworking watch TV through their television, as opposed to trying to draw it through our network, where we were punching a level of traffic that had we not been able to analyze that and make that advice, we actually would have had to dial up the amount of bandwidth on order and stay within our current capability. In certain areas, particularly in the Office 365, we're buying a lot more minutes related to our M365 contract, and people who don't have really great internet service and are using having the Microsoft service actually use the either a mobile phone or a landline as the audio channel on a in a conference call. So so in one case we were able to mitigate and stay sort of within our estimate, because we had the analytical capability. And in another case, we added it up, developed the forecast, and we've had working with CFO and our procurement team had dollars added to the contract.
Before I go to Ches, Zane, just jump in real quick. Are you getting a lot of agencies who are worried about that consumption model? We hear that oh, let's move to the consumption model. But sounds like someone like Howard goes, we're there, and boy, sometimes it's a little scary.
Yeah, and planning for it, it's just something like COVID-19 you can never plan for. It shows up in your world very differently. I think having an OpEx view of the world and consumption-based model saves you from having those spikes when you have to have capital infused into your world every 3-4 years from a technology refresh perspective. We've seen that play out at Department of Homeland Security, where we provide land managed services for them. And it provides a stable work environment where as you flex, as you grow, you use more service and pay for it. And if you go down, you go down and don't pay for those services. So it does provide benefit for the taxpayer themselves, as well as, I mean, how you get operationalized and continue to have technology refreshes show up without having to plan for that capital spend that comes with it. One of the things Howard was talking about was we were seeing a lot of spike in legacy products that we use, like audio conferencing. Those bridges that never got used that much. We saw almost 2 to 3x surge in that happen in our marketplace, and we had to scale it accordingly because those are legacy products and we're using, but all of a sudden they're in high demand and people want to utilize those. So having the ability to provide those, and there's choke points, as Howard was mentioning, like the cell towers. When you're using a cell phone from home, it's not planned for that, or your CO might have too many concurrent calls. So locally, you might get choked out even getting to the bridge itself to get connected. So all those things are playing, but I think everyone is working together to solve that, and it's stabilizing. We started to see it stabilize now. So we'll continue to monitor and work through whatever challenges come our way.
Chaz, jump in here too. Let's play off of what you heard from Howard and Zane and Alan a little bit about not just SD-WAN, but this as a service, the cloud model. How's the National Science Foundation kind of taking advantage of the cloud and consumption-based model?
Sure, thank you. So before I start, a few words about SD-WAN. So we are a single location, single network, so we don't have really a lot of use cases to segment our network and play with. So that's it's very straightforward. So we don't really look at that as an immediate need. However, there's a lot of talk about TIC 3.0. So I want to chime in a little bit, given the situation with here with COVID-19. So today, we are leveraging TIC 2.0, and the TIC 2.0 is network-centric model, right? So with the situation given, like, I know we have to force we have a lot of great capabilities for our remote users. So, we have a laptop given issue to everybody. We have a great set of collaboration tools, and we are very mobile friendly. So we are great, right? But what happens is because of this TIC 2.0 thing, we make everybody to go through our VPN infrastructure, right? And we closely watch our bandwidth. And there is a limitation with what we have. And for example, this impacts the customer experience, right? Because we are asking people to not stream videos, don't use social media, those kind of things. And also, in an emergency situation like this, we had to turn on capabilities on demand basis. Like, we had to turn on Microsoft Teams, we had to turn on Zoom, those kind of things, right? So the problem with that 2.0 model is it is network centric, and it takes a lot of resources, and we have to deal with these things. The 3.0 capability is a data centric approach, which is a great model, and we wanted that yesterday, actually. And we look forward for the new EIS to bring those capabilities and make it available for agencies like us, so we can turn on capabilities on demand basis. And we are looking at in the future enabling our systems with intelligence, right? The mission systems. So we need a capability like where we run a service on one cloud provider, and we want to turn on an algorithm and quickly plug in that algorithm into the service that we are using, running in a provider one. And these kind of capabilities can only be made available with the TIC 3.0 data-centric cybersecurity architecture. And we really are looking forward to do that.
I keep hearing this TIC 3.0 thing. I love talking about TIC. We're going to do that in the next segment because we're just about out of time. But before we end this segment, let me just bring back around to Alan for a second. Alan, when the consumption model, is that something that EIS can support? I'm going to say yes, of course it can, but talk a little bit about how it can support it. And then do agencies get that? Because I think that's the key here. Do they understand how it works?
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, so for example, infrastructure as a service is one of the services provided on EIS. That is a consumption model, cloud-based type framework that is available on EIS. Network as a service is another way that can be provided on EIS, so that a agency, what typically an agency looks at is buying the components, the software, the security, and all that. Where if you have it all bundled together, no different than what you do with your phones. It's all bundled together in terms of how you get the services. Howard touched on the importance of being on the monitor. I look at it from perspective though, in contracts, we have cost plus fixed fee type contracts. You know, those are all, again, really technically a consumption model. It's cost plus. And so you're really are in the framework already. It's just a matter of adjusting how you budget and manage it in a much more close fashion. When you go out and you say you need like 5,000 VPN licenses, you're paying for 5,000 VPN license, but maybe you're only using 3,000 in a particular period of time, but you're still paying for 5,000 licenses. Why be concerned with the licenses, the security and all that if you scaling up and down? And I think Howard brought a great approach of looking at it from looking at the model and of what you're currently using and being able to provide guidelines out of to consumers that when they're using too much, there's not the business case. There's a lot of the technology that we don't have implemented in our infrastructure. For example, SD-WAN can greatly reduce the costs of the infrastructure and allow a lot more value in terms of how things are delivered in a consumption model.
All right, those are the two things we're going to address in that next segment: security, TIC 3.0, and then the value of SD-WAN and moving to a modernized network. But first, let's take a quick break. You're listening to the panel discussion, Modernizing Federal Networks, sponsored by CenturyLink on Federal News Network.